Blood and water. Both liquids are central thematic pillars of Fallout 3. The irradiated remains of the Potomac bisect the entire capital wasteland, from its headwaters in the rocky northwest to the very resolution of the game at Project Purity at the Jefferson Memorial. And just as water flows across the game world, so too does blood. Violence spills across the capital like a sanguine tributary. And much in the same way water seeks water, you seek your father. Blood for blood. I find it very telling that given the symbolism of these two liquids in Fallout 3, easily one of the best quests in the game involves them both to some degree. In this episode of Anatomy of a Quest, we'll be looking at an early game questline titled Blood Ties that, although superficially a bit goofy, actually ends up playing out with enough depth and player choice that it easily stands alongside Fallout 1 and 2 quests in terms of themes and mechanical complexity. In addition, we will also explore how what is already arguably one of the better quests in Bethesda's catalog can be expanded upon with even just a few changes and additions to the existing mechanics. And it goes without saying, spoilers are abound for Blood Ties, so this is your chance to go play through the quest before this video. Alright, get your steaks and your garlic ready as we journey to post-nuclear Washington, D.C. Keeping the logistics brief, Blood Ties is designed as an early to mid-game quest from Bethesda Game Studios' 2008 title, Fallout 3. Now, despite its attempts at facilitating role-playing within a post-nuclear setting, I don't believe it's a controversial thing to say that Bethesda is largely hit or miss in this area, with writing and systems that only partially support deeper role-playing. However, I'd argue Blood Ties largely bucks this trend, both mechanically and thematically. Even the premise of Blood Ties itself is quite interesting, as the main meat of the task set before the player is not immediately obvious. For starters, the main premise of messenger for an NPC, found in every RPG under the sun, is quickly permutated into a much more interesting murder mystery / detective story, with some real philosophical depth. In addition, for a game all about combating monsters and raiders in the wasteland, combat is entirely optional for every stage of Blood Ties, with a large amount of diegetic and non-diegetic skill checks involved, both of which I will go into detail over in later sections. Finally, the locations and areas chosen for Blood Ties also hint at a clever usage of the setting that rewards creative and logical thinking from players. Ultimately, I do think all the pieces present really set the stage for something special. And that brings us to the beginning of our quest. Blood Ties begins in an interesting manner. Seated in the corner of Moriarty's saloon in Megaton, players may speak to Lucy West. After a brief conversation regarding the delivery of a letter home to her family, whom she is worried about, players are given both a letter and the location of her home in their Pip-Boy. Though this is clearly signposted by the designers, players are still given several ways to discover this quest. Speaking to Moriarty drops a piece of dialogue about Lucy and how she seems worried and possibly needs assistance. It's also worth mentioning here that players may even stumble upon Arafu and Blood Ties without ever even meeting Lucy, simply by exploring and following the remains of the Potomac, starting things with a different context and different expectations from the player. But, given that most players will discover Blood Ties via Lucy and Megaton, the game then allows players the time and opportunity to learn about Lucy and her request. Further dialogue options allow players to learn about the settlement of Arafu, why this task is important to Lucy, and, more importantly, why she needs you to do it. It's also a nice touch that the player is also able to flat out refuse to deliver the letter for Lucy. While seemingly innocuous, it is still wonderful to see player agency being preserved even in the face of missing out on game content, something that has slowly fallen by the wayside in later Bethesda titles. However, should they choose to accept this quest, players then make their way to Arafu and are greeted with a bang. Players are greeted, in a way, by Evan King, the frazzled and on-edge sheriff of the settlement. A quick word with him confirms Lucy's fears. Arafu has become the subject of raids by a gang of sorts who only attack the settlement at night. After a quick request by King to check on the other residents, Blood Ties takes a sharp turn. The entire West family lies murdered, except for Ian. A tiered medicine check grants the player a few extra pieces of info that can be taken to King to gain a better picture of what the player is actually facing. After returning to King, he asks about Ian and suspects that the raiders, known as the Family, have kidnapped him. Further conversations with King result in him revealing that he suspects where the Family are operating from, but he can't quite be sure. Players are then given 3 separate quest markers to investigate and determine the location of the gang: Northwest Seneca Station, Hamilton's Hideaway, and Moonbeam Outdoor Cinema. It's worth pointing out here that back at the West residence, players with a medicine skill above 90 are able to deduce the correct location of the hideout right away, while characters lacking this skill will have to explore in order to find it. This segment of Blood Ties is interesting for several reasons. One is that it actually solves the quest marker problem present in later Bethesda titles by actually adding extra markers as red herrings. This seems backwards at first, but while the marker tells you where to go, it doesn't tell you which locations are actually correct. Additionally, this use of markers actually functions as a puzzle for the player and not just the character. Given the facts from King that the gang is nocturnal and no one has seen them moving in daylight before, an astute player can logically deduce that one marker, Moonbeam Outdoor Cinema, is just not a possible location for the gang to be in, as it is both outdoors and partially visible from Arafu. I love this, because it's such an elegant yet subtle use of player skill and knowledge that is never flagged, but still makes you feel smart. Makes you feel like a detective solving a mystery. Second is how well it facilitates player choice that is based around Fallout 3's strongest asset: the world and navigating it. Northwest Seneca Station contains a pair of ghoul ultrajet drug runners who confirm that the Family is based out of Maresti Train Yard. In addition, while the Family seems to terrorize Arafu, these ghouls remark how they are largely left alone by the Family, foreshadowing some of their motivations. The ghouls eventually reveal that the quickest way to Maresti is through a train tunnel system located in a door toward the back in Seneca Station. However, this route, while faster, does place players against several Mirelurks, which are challenging for early-level characters. Alternatively, players may journey overland to Maresti Station and risk whatever creatures lie between them and the station, which do have a real chance to be more dangerous than Mirelurks. Regardless, players are given this choice to make before proceeding to the next stage of Blood Ties. After navigating the trap-riddled tunnels of the Family's hideout, players encounter their first member of the Family face-to-face. Though tough and imposing, Robert is noticeably non-violent for an alleged gang raider. Once again, players are given the option to use speech checks and bribes to pass, or by using the letter from Lucy to gain access to the Family hideout, as it is revealed that Ian is indeed here. Alternatively, the more unusual option is to use the Cannibal perk, which also allows the player free access to the hideout. Once again, a brilliant usage of foreshadow. Proceeding inside leads the player to meet with Vance, the leader of the Family. Charismatic, intelligent, and articulate, Vance rather cryptically reveals the truth behind the Family and the Arafu attacks. It was Ian and his own violent, cannibalistic feelings, not Vance, that killed the Wests. Sensing a kindred spirit in Ian, Vance offered him guidance and acceptance as a way to understand his violent and cannibalistic intonations. By following the teachings and mythos of European vampires, Vance teaches those of the Family to resist their cravings for flesh and only drink of the blood. But vampire or not, players must still reach Ian. This section represents the largest distribution of skill checks in this quest, and it really shows the designers stretching their legs. Players can persuade Vance with a speech or perk checks, or, failing that, they can learn about the rules and philosophy of the gang from a nearby terminal that Vance directs them to. Rather than a group of bloodthirsty killers, as King paints them, the family operates more like a recovery or support group who, though living in a lawless apocalypse, still adhere to a rigid moral code, despite their own troubles and sins. Additionally, players can approach and speak with all of the other members of the family, and use a combination of different perks and speech checks to gain access to Ian's room, while also having the option to hack the terminal outside of Ian's room, pick the key code off of Vance, learn about the family's rules and laws and history, and then report back to Vance and potentially have another chance to gain access to Ian, or even resort to violence and kill Vance and the entire family. Regardless of their path, players then confront Ian and can attempt to persuade him in one of two directions. Either return home and attempt to come to terms with what he has done, or remain with this new family and forsake his old one along with his past. Once again, player freedom is facilitated here through speech, perks, and even offering him the letter from his sister. Depending on player choice, Ian can remain with the family, return home, or even be killed by the player, and the entirety of the quest can be abandoned. Killing Ian notwithstanding, players then return to Vance and inform him of Ian's decision. Vance respects both Ian's decision and also the player's role in brokering the outcome, and offers them a shish kebab schematic for their efforts. Interestingly, an integrated post-quest quest of sorts allows the player to fully explore the relationship between these two groups. Following a successful medicine or intelligence check, players can negotiate an alliance between Arafu and the family, with Arafu donating or selling blood packs to the family as a substitute for their blood cravings, and the family in return offering protection to Arafu. Players are also given the chance to gain the hematophage perk from Vance, which increases the amount of healing players receive from blood packs themselves. Returning to King allows the player to complete the quest and even follow up with Ian about his experiences, as well as opening services and rewards from the people of Arafu. Finally, this brings us to the lifeblood of this video, the real meat and potatoes. How can another pass over this quest through a critical eye bolster what are already strong uses of theme, mechanics, and player agency? First off the bat, I think Blood Ties could benefit from an additional route of quest discovery, such as a journal in Lucy's shack or even a random event in the wasteland, where the player happens upon a corpse with all of its blood drained out. Regarding the journal in Lucy's home, this could even allow the player the opportunity to use a barter check, which are very sorely underused in the game, to better negotiate a reward for a more thief or roguish type of character. Moving on to Arafu and the quest proper, I think there are several areas for expansion here. First, while I do appreciate the usage of a tiered medicine check at the West residence, the lack of other skill checks renders this part of the investigation feeling a little anemic. For example, by adding a repair check to the door, it could reveal that the lock was actually not broken, and thus someone may have been invited inside the home. Or, a character with a high enough perception could make a check that reveals that there was an additional set of footprints inside, one entering, but two leaving, thereby adding another clue to the mystery. Additionally, players who approach this quest at a later time or a higher level would be able to integrate the Night Person perk, or even characters with a high enough sneak skill could be given a unique way to track the family by staging an ambush for the next time that they return. This would bleed over into players that already have the Mesmetron and give it more utility by stunning the returning member of the family. Another option is to grant players a unique item for this quest: stun grenades. Available only from King, stun grenades would allow the player to capture a member of the family and interrogate them as to uncover the family's hideout by using speech checks, perks, or even violence, as well as providing a non-lethal route for players in other quest lines. The schematics for these, however, should only be provided by King after completing the quest. Even the logic of this item could be explained from the Ewers, as Ken Ewer is rather handy with repairs, and given the amount of scrap nearby, King could have scavenged the items from anything. Maybe tin cans, scrap metal, a battery, and some sort of food item, like sugar bombs. This again introduces choice and trade-off, as sugar bombs are required for the production of Ultrajet from the ghouls in Seneca Station. This brings up another point that I think would benefit the player's freedom, and ironically, that's restriction. As it stands, the biggest shortcoming to Blood Ties is the presence of a clear and optimal solution. You deliver the letter, negotiate the Blood Pact deal with Vance, get the Hematophage perk, done. No real hard choices, no missing out, no downsides. I get it, but to me, that's a problem. The lack of missing out means the quest plays out the same each time, regardless of how you go about it from a character standpoint. From a player standpoint, there really aren't any choices here. The only reason that one might kill the family to betray Arafu is it's more of a conscious decision to experiment by the player rather than an organic choice based on the parameters of the quest itself. As it stands, I like Vance, the family, and the characterization of all of them, so I wouldn't actually do very much to change that outcome. Vance's aversion towards violence and his general attempts to raise up those who suffer from different sorts of trauma in their past, it wouldn't fit a path that has the player killing Arafu with the help of the family. So I feel that a player siding with the family route should be maintained mostly as is. However, doing this should still be the only way to gain the Hematophage perk and the Shish Kebab schematic. Additionally, I think keeping the family route the same helps preserve some of the philosophical weight of the quest, which seems to lack a counterpoint on the Arafu side. To address this point, I would stage it so that completing the quest gates the player off from one faction or the other. King is played a bit too passively and open to resolution in this quest for my liking. I think given someone in his position, revenge would be a perfectly sensible response, and realistically, he wouldn't be as trusting of a peaceful solution with the family. Additionally, while I don't see a need to explain much about what drove Ian to suffer from such feelings, I do think it would benefit the quest to show how things in Arafu may have been going south even before the family attacks. I think by including speech or karma checks in the conversations with the Ewers or the Shenzis, you could touch on things like maybe Ian was suffering from abuses from his parents, or maybe King had more of an authoritarian style of rulership. I think by doing this, you could do two things. First, it would enrich the complexity of the narrative, as it would give the players more intricate questions to answer. Did King's behavior bring this on Arafu? Is the family actually just the people who left coming back for revenge? Is the nature of Ian's attack really because of his inherent violent nature, or was it a way to escape his sordid family history and deal with the world around him? Secondly, it would give a run where players want to use violence in combat against the family a bit more context if they agreed with King's more authoritarian leadership style, where morals and ethics are secondary to control and force. As stated before, there's currently no story reason to ever use violence in Blood Ties, outside of just player curiosity. However, creating a stronger philosophical split between both groups would make a combat route much more natural and diegetic. Given his propensity for tinkering and explosives, I think King would task the player with planting a remote detonated bomb in the family hideout. This bomb could be used in several ways to my mind, either by collapsing the main entrance and sealing the family in forever, almost like a tomb or a coffin, clearing the collapsed rear tunnel and allowing King and a few members of Arafu to attack the family with player assistance, or just blowing up everyone in the main room. Regardless, taking this route would ensure that the family turns on the player, but also presents a more clear division between paths that is lacking in the quest as it stands. Of course, players always have the option to plant the bomb and then leave Ian to his fate, and I think failing the quest should still be allowed without a reward. Also, telling the family of the plot to bomb them and then returning to King to inform him that they have indeed betrayed him should have the entirety of Arafu turn on the player as well. Obviously, the player would need to account for this when choosing, as each area would require checks to plant and even to escape, such as a high strength or luck to climb out of the tunnel rubble or find a loose slab of concrete to escape through. But I think it is important to create gameplay options for players who want a more sneaky or saboteur playstyle. Returning to Arafu after rescuing Ian and bombing the family would then unlock the grenade reward from King and complete the quest. Finally, just as the Hematophage perk is an optional reward for players with the right investment of skills, players should have the option to report back to Lucy after Ian's safe return and gain another optional perk from her, Family Friend, which gives players a bonus when bartering with caravan merchants, as well as the option to run letters for Lucy once a week for supplies like ammo, caps, or consumables. Lucy is also drastically underutilized in this quest, and I think this would give her both a role in the post-quest stage, but also a sense that her character has grown as well. She still loves Ian, despite what has happened, and the player can continue to facilitate letters between them or even convince him to move to Megaton with his sister, with skill checks or perks. Blood Ties is a fascinating piece of design. It exists in this strange fugue state between being both nonsensical and complexly philosophical, while also being easily one of the best designed quests from a Bethesda RPG, let alone Fallout 3. The characters are complex, their motivations are believable, and the abundance of player choice when dealing with the outcomes are clearly well designed and thought out. Even without the changes we've explored today, I still think Blood Ties is one of the greats in the Fallout Quest pantheon and is absolutely worth a playthrough. Lucy's conflict between her new life on her own and her family she leaves behind mirrors both Vance and Ian's story regarding the influence of one's past on their future and how to address those influences of nature and nurture in regards to the self. King and Arafu also echo what happens when those lessons are viewed furtively rather than courageously, with both quite literally slowly decaying over time due to fear. So in conclusion, I hope that this excursion into Blood Ties highlights both its existing qualities and also its possibilities in its design. It was a ton of fun to find out all the ways I could explore the content with different outlooks and skills, and each time I was surprised in the ways that I could. So thank you to everyone watching, and I hope you join me next time as we dig into more of your favorite games and stories on Anatomy of a Quest.